The Law and Crime Network. I'm your host, Amy Dash, and I'm joined here by fellow attorney Christi Kunzig. Did I get that right?
Yes, you got it perfect.
Good. Okay, I asked you a couple times. Now, this morning we're listening to a lot of analysts and experts. We heard from a DNA analyst, and now we're hearing from a forensic scientist, and they're looking at the way that the glass shattered on the windshield. Why is that relevant in this case?
This is important because this is going to go to a lot of the elements of either side. It's going to favor one of them. Either the prosecution saying, he must have done this to cover up because he actually beat his wife, or it's going to go toward the defense showing, no, the pipe actually pierced through, and this would explain some of the injuries, and he's telling the story that really actually happened.
But really, all the prosecution has in this case is the accusation that his story doesn't match up with the injuries.
Right, a lot of the injuries are inconsistent with what he's saying actually happened. He was vague in some of his not testimony, but when they were investigating him, he couldn't really specifically say what had happened. So they're just finding some inconsistencies in his stories as well as in her injuries that don't add up. And so that's kind of making everyone wonder, is he telling the truth here, or is he trying to cover up his own crime?
Yeah, but when I saw the interrogation yesterday, and I saw most of it, not all of it, it didn't seem like he was telling one story, then changing his story and telling another. It seemed like what he was saying was, I don't know, I don't remember, because I was in a traumatic car accident where a pipe literally burst through the windshield and killed my wife.
Right, I agree with you. And so
therefore, he even said at one point to the detectives, if you guys have ever been in an accident like this, you can understand how I may not remember everything that happened before or immediately after, and I was rushing to try to get my wife safe and pull her out of the car, and so that's like a little hazy. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense, and I think that's why he keeps saying, let the evidence speak for itself, which is interesting because the evidence is kind of going against him here, but he keeps relying on it because he doesn't remember what happened, or he claims that he doesn't remember.
Yeah, exactly. And so even though they have these experts talking about the patterns on the windshield and where there's blood and where there isn't, this really is going to become just a battle of experts, and you're going to hear totally opposite opinions.
Absolutely.
Is that what we can expect? Because right now we're just hearing the prosecution.
Right now we are. But so far we've been hearing, nothing that's really a smoking gun. Nothing that says, oh my gosh, okay, this is the prosecution's case. It kind of leaves room for debate, so the defense will be able to kind of come in and throw some doubt and maybe sway the jurors to their side.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like the prosecution's hurdle here is to get rid of all of the reasonable doubt. Right. It's not the onus on the defense to create the reasonable doubt. I feel like it's there.
No, right.
And the prosecution has to overcome it this time.
They do, and so far I haven't seen anything that says, okay, you know what, they've got this in the bag, I'm on their side. Mm-hmm. And you're right, they do have the burden of proof. They have to get the jury to dispel any doubt at all that any other thing could have happened here. And you're right, I don't see them doing that yet.
And when you listen to these experts, they have to preface everything with, my opinion is that it could have only, the last expert said, it could have only happened this way, where the pipe went through the windshield and there's no other possibility as to how there could have been blood. It had to have happened that the pipe went through the windshield after the blood got onto it. But it's his opinion. And we're going to hear the opposite when the defense calls their experts.
Absolutely. And even earlier today, when we were hearing some of the DNA analysis, we were talking about transfers and even tertiary transfers. So, that leaves a lot of room for a lot of different things that could happen, which is going to be able to create a lot of doubt in the jurors' minds.
When you're analyzing science after the fact, there really could be multiple scenarios that would change that scientific outcome or that pattern that's left after the accident occurs. So the fact that we don't know what happened before and we're looking at the science after, how are the jurors, do you think, going to wrap their heads around this? And is this explained to the jurors, usually in the jury instruction or by either of the attorneys, that, listen, this is really a scientific assessment and the science comes after the event? And the event is what determines the science. And there can be many events that create a science that's totally different from the next scientific outcome.
I think this is something you see a lot during the examination, the cross-examination. They'll bring it up, couldn't this have come from some other way, or couldn't this have happened in another scenario? And the expert will then have to explain, yes, here are other ways that could have happened. This could have resulted from a number of scenarios. This one might be the most likely, or sometimes they have figures to say, well, I think one of the numbers, it was 570 times more likely that certain transfers happen a certain way, as we heard earlier.
And so what's happening with this expert is he is working backwards from the prosecution's theory. He has the prosecution's theory as this is how the event happened.
Right.
He beat his wife with a pipe, and then he put it through the windshield himself. And so his scientific assessment comes from that. Whereas with the defense, they're going to be operating from the case of, we don't know what happened, many things could have happened, therefore you can't conclusively say it happened the way the prosecution does.
Exactly, and I know the prosecution is pointing at some of the glass shatters, how it seems that the passenger door may have been open because there's no glass in the pocket, and that's something that they're going to point out. But again, the defense can come in and kind of say to the jury, well, here's a reasonable excuse as to why that may have happened. Here's why there wouldn't be glass here, or why there's blood in the places that there's blood.
And so they're going to go through multiple ways that this accident could have actually happened.
Right.
And so then the jurors are going to have to figure out how they think the accident happened, which in the end really is very speculative. So how do you convict on that basis? That the jurors are going to decide how the accident that nobody saw except this one man unfolded.
Right. One of the things, unfortunately, sometimes it comes down to how charismatic is your witness. If the jury likes them, finds them credible, says, you know what, this makes sense to me, I'm going to buy that story, they might then just side with your witness and say, okay, you know what, I'm sold here. If you don't have a very charismatic witness, or they seem like maybe they're not entirely sure, they're not as confident in their answers, or they're saying, oh, there's so many ways, you're going to lose some jurors that way. So that's kind of your burden when you're picking out an expert. You want someone who's confident, who seems likable and knows what they're saying, so that they can tell the jury, you know what, it's my opinion, but I'm pretty sure it happened this way, and then the jurors say, oh, well, he's the expert, I'm going to side with him.
And how many forensic scientists have you seen that are charismatic on the stand?
They're few and far between, so that definitely makes it tough.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people, when they're looking, these attorneys, when they're looking for experts, they're really looking at their CVs, because when you're establishing that this person is an expert, you hear a whole laundry list of they went to Harvard or Columbia and they're the top scientist in the field. And so does that help with the credibility as well, in addition to their personalities?
It definitely does, because again, they're saying, okay, this is the expert, here are all of their credentials, this is why I should listen to them, they know about this a lot better than I do, so if they say that's how it happened, I'm going to agree that that's how it happened.
Perfect. And now we're going to just toss to another trial that we're following. Xavier Dobson was killed in Knoxville, Tennessee. He was very heroic in throwing his body in front of two teenage girls to shield them from bullets, a standout football player who sacrificed his life for